quickly. Settle down.
Time present for the first time anywhere the dramatic picturization of General Dwight D. Eisenhower's book, Crusade in Europe.
When the war was over, General Eisenhower, more than any other one man, symbolized the victorious effort of the American people. And now, out of this achievement, comes the general story. Every American's story. Crusade in Europe. In 1 month, Crusade in Europe sold more than any other non-fiction book published in the entire year of 1948. Its readership grew greater day by day. It was serialized in 100 major newspapers throughout the country. It was presented in Life magazine for Life's 26 million readers. But Americans had never seen the picture record of the war as General Eisenhower described it. This record lay buried in millions of feet of war film, locked in government vaults, in the secret files of our own Army, Navy, and Air Force, and in the captured archives of our enemies. To bring this pictorial record to your television screen, March of Time film editors performed a monumental task, creating from this gigantic wealth of material the dramatic and significant document you are about to see. It is with pride that Life and Time present to America one of the greatest television events of our time.
In the Allied headquarters at Reims, Colonel General Jodl signed the instrument of German surrender on May 7th, 1945. At midnight of the next day, there ended in Europe a conflict that had been raging since September 1st, 1939.
General Jodl, Chief of Staff of the German Army, faced his conquerors across a narrow table in a French schoolroom, and thus ended the reign of the so-called master race. Official emissary of the defeated Nazi Empire, Jodl surrendered unconditionally to the victorious Allied powers, with the United States represented by Lieutenant General Walter Beadle Smith. In just a few minutes, the simple ceremony in the little schoolroom brought to an end the major phase of the most paralyzing war the world had ever known. A war which had involved millions of men, some of whom fought relentlessly for the domination of the world, and others to give mankind throughout the world the chance to live in freedom and at peace. The long-awaited victory was a reality. In its wake, the war left Germany in ruins, her principal cities and towns demolished, some 8 million of her people killed or wounded, and her industry almost obliterated. A nation completely broken in spirit and starving. For the Allies, the price of victory was appallingly high, beyond the powers of any statistician to compute. History lays the blame for this costly world struggle on the head of one man, the little German house painter who had instilled a hysterical devotion to his party and cause in millions of German men, women, and children. Adolf Hitler's pattern for conquest was based on promoting unrest and riots, and then forcing Nazi party members into key posts. In March 1938, such a bloodless revolution was conducted in Austria. The Nazis took over the government. German troops poured across the border. And once proud Austria became the first nation to fall before the weight of Nazi aggression. Ignoring worldwide protests, Hitler looked about for still other fields of conquest. At Munich in September 1938, he took full advantage of the willingness of more peaceable nations to compromise, to agree to almost any Hitler proposal that would avert war. Signed eagerly by Hitler, by Benito Mussolini for Italy, by Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain for Great Britain, and by Premier Édouard Daladier for France, the historic Munich Pact called for the Nazi occupation of the Sudetenland territories of Czechoslovakia. Protection was guaranteed for shrunken Czechoslovakia's new borders. But to Hitler's henchmen, the pact was merely a slip of paper. Only 6 months later, its terms were forgotten, and the Nazi tide swept without resistance over all Czechoslovakia. Into Berlin, heart of the Nazi homeland, Adolf Hitler was paraded as the greatest conquering hero of the ages. The heady fever of victory was sweeping across the whole of the Reich, drawing more and more Germans to the enthusiastic support of the Führer. After months of negotiations with Britain and France for a three-power treaty to guarantee Poland's boundaries, Soviet Russia suddenly turned about and entered into a non-aggression alliance with Nazi Germany. Although communists had once been described as the scum of the earth by the Nazi Führer, and though communism and Nazism had long been irreconcilable enemies, both nations considered the partnership mutually advantageous from a strictly military standpoint. Less than a fortnight after the signing of the Russo-German Pact, the Hitler timetable called for a quick thrust against Poland. This time, there was no mistaking the Führer's intentions. No compromise was possible. Carefully trained Nazi soldiers deposited on Polish soil in a lightning strike helped disorganize the enemy. which was ill-equipped to resist the powerful German blitzkrieg. Behind the paratroopers came hundreds of German tanks, which plunged on through the Polish countryside against little opposition. The Polish plans for defense were virtually worthless against the might of the highly geared modern German war machine. The vaunted Nazi Wehrmacht was brutally thorough, sparing nothing in its steady advance. All the years of training and indoctrination in Nazi ideals repaid their cost to Hitler in Poland. For in each young Nazi soldier surged the will to conquer for the Führer. Yes, the Nazi leaders had planned well. In those first months of war, the world seemed to them to be theirs for the taking. On that historic September 1st in 1939, when the cancerous Nazi growth spread farther still, the people of Europe, England, and the world entered a new era.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here is a recorded message from the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Neville Chamberlain.
I am speaking to you in the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany. You can imagine what a bitter blow it is to me that all my long struggle to win peace has failed.
Even in the far-off Philippines, halfway around the globe, the momentous news of the declaration of war between England and Germany came as a rude shock to civilians, American military personnel, and the commanding officer of the military forces in the Philippines, and his senior military assistant, General Douglas MacArthur, and Colonel Dwight Eisenhower.
I was certain that the United States would be drawn into the whirlpool of the war. It seemed to me that we would be compelled to defend ourselves against the Axis within a year.
But most of his countrymen, in that first grim year of war in Europe, did not share Colonel Eisenhower's convictions. Millions of Americans felt that the war was not worth getting excited about. While Americans concerned themselves with less weighty worries, the Nazi conquest of Europe was proceeding on a quickening schedule. In the spring of 1940, Denmark and Norway fell, and then Hitler's forces overran the Low Countries, Holland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Behind her vaunted Maginot Line, France felt secure, in the belief that her fortress facing Germany to the east was impregnable. Imbued with a deep aversion to aggressive war, the French put their faith in defensive warfare, a defense based on French military successes in World War I. They reasoned that any aggressive move by Germany against France would obviously come from the east, across the French-German border, now rendered impassable by the intricate fortifications which were constructed a decade earlier at a cost of millions of dollars. But the Nazis had other ideas about how to invade France. Bypassing the Maginot Line, swift-moving spearheads of the modernized German war machine knifed into France from Belgium in the north, and the battle for France was joined. conquest of France was astonishingly brief. For the Führer, this was the greatest prize he had yet captured. In a matter of days, the German army was rolling through the French countryside toward Paris. Germany's traditional enemy now lay at the feet of the gloating Nazi Superman. The conquering German army marched into Paris on June 14, 1940, a day which will be remembered forever by the French people. This was the most rewarding moment in the life of the little German house painter. With Paris conquered, his dream of ruling the capitals of the world seemed closer still to becoming a reality. Across the Atlantic, the news of the collapse of France brought the war a little closer to many Americans who had a warm spot in their hearts for that gallant nation. But to most people in the U.S., the war still seemed remote. Many preferred to ignore it.
The way I see it, Bill, we stuck our noses into Europe's mess in 1917 and we got nothing for it. I say we ought to keep hands off. Let them take care of themselves. You can count me out.
Don't give it another thought, Joe. With all that water between us and Hitler, he can't hurt us. Say, what do you think of the Tigers' chances for the pennant this year?
The Tigers won the pennant that year, and the British Army was pushed off the European continent. In one of the darkest hours of the war, the British saved the situation from becoming a major disaster. At Dunkirk, in late May, the retreating British troops were forced to abandon large amounts of weapons and other equipment in their flight to the sea. The Nazis had hoped to bottle them up and annihilate them. Driven to the extreme edge of the European continent, under steady fire by the enemy, the British suffered heavy losses. But surviving British and a scattering of French troops were met by all the ships and small craft the British Navy could muster to meet the emergency. The rescue was a notable triumph for the British Navy, which succeeded in evacuating more than 335,000 men, 80% of the total, under the nose of the German Air Force. Hitler now controlled the continent right to the sea and quickly transformed the French coastal area into a gigantic base from which to attack Britain by air. In an all-out attempt to pulverize Britain, preparatory to an invasion of the English coast, the Nazis launched a series of daily air raids on London and the surrounding area in mid-June. The schedule was soon stepped up to include day and night attacks. The British people took this steady pounding in stride with magnificent calm, but with an iron determination to bear up under the worst the Jerries could give them.
Let's go!
But all England did not merely sit and take it. The Royal Air Force, though outnumbered by the stronger Luftwaffe, gave battle day and night and took an increasingly heavy toll of Nazi planes. Right from the start of the Battle of Britain, the RAF shot down 3 or 4 times as many planes as it lost. But though many Nazi planes were downed, more kept coming. Once they got through the screen of RAF fighters over the channel, it was up to the British Coast Artillery.
Angle 21, bearing 198, angle 22, bearing 194. Set 10,600. 10,600.
German plane production was at a new high, and the Luftwaffe's attacks grew in frequency and intensity. As winter approached, everyone in England, from the man in the street to Winston Churchill, realized that the fate of the world depended on the battle for Britain.
Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of vertical silence. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
With the German seizure of Denmark and Norway, the Blitz that swept from the Rhine through France to the Bay of Biscay, and the crippled retreat of the British Army from Dunkirk, America began to grow uneasy.